Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to disaster recovery, business continuity, testing, exercises, resilience, anything that can help you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Today, you may recognize my guest because he's returning again. I think, Ray, this is what, the second or third time
Yeah,
that I've had you now? So I'm glad to have you back. Ray Holloman, welcome back to the show.
thanks. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, and today we've got an interesting topic, something a little different.
Mhm.
Are your plans and exercises thinking about equity and inclusion? So that's a different topic. And I think you presented this recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I presented it at DRJ Fall 2023.
And you stopped by our live broadcast too, which was really nice. So I was
Yeah.
glad to see you again. Actually, you've appeared on almost all of our live broadcasts now. Every time James and I show up at a conference, you're there.
Yeah, I just show up in the background. I'm like, hey, everybody.
Well, welcome back. I'm glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Let's jump right into this because this is such an interesting topic. Uh, in exercising, what do you mean by equity and inclusion?
Yeah, so I really got to thinking about, how we do testing, and we really think about testing and exercising in this like one way. And if people, I feel like we're always trying to figure out ways to exclude parts and parameters of our test scenarios to make it easier on us. But in that, sometimes what I feel like we find is that we actually aren't making it equitable because we are not practicing what we're saying we're going to do in our plans. Like I've been a part of organizations where maybe the person in the wheelchair, we're like, don't worry about evacuating. This is just a drill. But it's like that person should still have to evacuate the building because if we don't practice how we do it, then we aren't ensuring that we know how. And then that inclusion piece comes in to making sure that people that may have some type of difference. Are they being included in the process of what we're thinking about, how we do our testing, how we do exercises, what makes the most sense for them? And asking them, a person that may be in a wheelchair, are we asking them, hey, what's the best way to evacuate the building versus making an assumption of what we think may be the best way to evacuate them out of the building? So it's really trying to get more people into the process and people that may be different, have different abilities, may have a physical disability, anything like that, and being able to really include them in the process because at the end of the day, business continuity and disaster recovery is really about the people in our businesses and our organizations. So how are we ensuring that everyone is able to have a place in this kind of ecosystem of BC and disaster recovery?
I find that interesting that the point you just made. We find ways to make our testing easier. It's like let's trim off that. Let's trim off this. And I find that rather interesting, so that we can say we tested it and or exercised it and give us ourselves a pat on the back because we really didn't face the challenges.
Exactly. A lot of times I feel like, it's like we know there's going to be a challenge or it may be difficult, or they're just like, we don't have enough time to go down that scenario. We'll do it next time. Well, next time, it keeps just rolling
Mm.
on down. And so we just never get to that point where we actually do it because some new project comes up. But if we start just holistically incorporating that into our process, then we don't have to worry about the next time because it's already there. It's already baked in. We took the couple of hours that it may have need to have those conversations, implemented it, and now that just becomes a part of our standard testing.
And we're really not taking into account how our employees feel if they're in a wheelchair or they're in a cast, or whatever the case may be. How do I want to find the right way of saying it, but if we're excluding them all the time, how's that making them feel, right?
Exactly. It's like it makes them feel like they're not a part of the organization because it's like, oh, I'm excluded
Yeah.
because I'm too complicated of a scenario. When it could be just a 10-minute conversation to figure out maybe we need to make sure that like a floor captain or somebody is assigned to ensure that they make it down the stairwell safely or whatever that evacuation procedure may need to be for that employee. But by like not including them, we don't know what they may need. And so then that just becomes a system of harming that employee because they're like, well, I feel like I'm not important, I'm not involved. Everybody else evacuates the building for the fire drill, but I'm still sitting here on the third floor. Like, why am I not a part of it? Why am I seen as too complicated to try to figure out what my needs are to try to make sure that I can evacuate safely just because I can't evacuate down the stairwell myself?
And I can't help but think that if someone is feeling excluded, not part of the organization, and you're not exercising this and really uh, taking into account their feelings and their input, that wouldn't that hinder morale or productivity as well? Like it's got a bigger impact.
Yeah, it's got a huge impact because if you think about, we're trying to always make sure that like people feel like they belong in these organizations, but that just kind of makes them feel like maybe this isn't the right organization for me. I don't feel like I belong. And so then they may leave the company, and that's an opportunity cost of now you've got to find somebody to replace them, all the recruiting
Mm.
and stuff that goes into replacing an employee when it could have been like a 20, 30-minute conversation figuring out what that employee actually needs and then meeting that need. Because it's one thing to just ask, but then we also have to meet that need and figure out. And it's like, that's what we should be doing. We're about taking care of our people. This is a part of taking care of our people, no matter how they come into the organization.
It's kind of like the organization will do its utmost to recruit people of different needs and things, but then when it comes to exercising and taking that extra step, it's too much of an effort.
Exactly.
I couldn't. I don't know how. I can't remember how long you've been in business continuity, and I know it's been a while or resilience, but I know it's been a few years, shall we say?
Yeah.
Um, I remember the days after 9/11 where we did have those exercises with people in wheelchairs or people that had in a cast or something or whatever the case may be, and we had how do we bring them down the stairs? Who carries them? Which stairwell, where they are in the building, and who designated people to help them, or if they couldn't go down, a designated area where they could go to protect themselves from fire or smoke or something like that. So, having gone through that, what changed? How come we forgot?
I think we just kind of got away from it. I think other things became more important. I think we started seeing more active shooter drills. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think just the focus may have changed. I think there are probably organizations that are still doing those types of things, especially when they are probably in high-rise buildings and things like that. But I think like as organizations kind of spread out, those are just like those type of safety drills. They may get forgotten because you may be in a leased building for a couple of years and then you may move somewhere else. I know at one company that I was at in 3 years, I was in three different buildings. And so, like you may just those type of things just get lost in thinking about those type of things. I think most organizations, they probably have it on a checklist somewhere, but when there's other priorities that come in, it just keeps continuing getting pushed down that list. But it's something that person in wheelchair needs to know where they need to go in the building. But I think the other piece is then also asking that person, what do they need? Maybe they're not in a wheelchair. Maybe they are vision impaired. Maybe they
Oh,
are hard of hearing, deaf. What do those employees need? Because that may be different. And it's just like asking them if they're willing to identify themselves. Some disabilities are more visible than others, but like, what is helpful for you? Like for somebody that may be blind or visually impaired, is it better for someone to hold on to you and lead you out? Or is it better for somebody to be in front of you and be behind you as you're going down the stairwell? asking those types of questions so the employee feels included in their own safety and the organization just hasn't made an assumption that somebody's going to come take you by the arm and take you downstairs, because that means that person is losing their independence in that moment when,
Yeah.
you know, they should be able to say, hey, this is what I need. Organization, can you meet that? Yes or no? And if you can't, then we have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do to mitigate that?
So how do we get a change in thinking with that? Because you brought up a multiple scenarios: hard of hearing, potential blind. They don't have to be in a wheelchair. It doesn't have to be visual, something that you see as a disability. So how do you get people to start changing that thinking when it comes to these exercises, so that we're not just exercising, and let's face it, we exercise a continuity plan or how to rebuild a server, get an
Mhm.
application up and running. So how do you get people to change their thinking to think beyond that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like as we, thinking about a lot of organizations are starting to do these equity and inclusion programs, and they talk a really good talk, but like, how are we making sure that we're implementing that into like all phases of our work? So, us as like resiliency professionals, we have to start thinking about, okay, what are organizations inside of our companies that we can partner with? Is it partnering with HR to see what is, who has self-identified as maybe having a disability, or has asked for some type of accommodations? I know in some countries that could get particularly hard to do, but anybody that's self-identified and is willing to come up, how do we start asking them, hey, we want to do better. We want to make sure that we're being inclusive of you, making sure that you feel that you still have your own independence in these types of scenarios. What are the things that help you? What can we do as, a resiliency part of the company for that employee to say, hey, we're going to provide you. You said that you need somebody in front of you, behind you when we have a fire drill. Okay, here's going to be a couple of people that are in your department that, and there'll be some alternates because not everybody's in the office every single day, but here's the people that should be able to, like, if something happens, they will be responsible for, ensuring that you can make it down the stairwell safely, making sure that you know that the fire alarm is going off. If you're hearing impaired, somebody can come grab you because that person may just not know what's going on.
Or even
um
how to notify them properly, not
exactly.
just showing up and grabbing them, like, come on,
Exactly.
what's going on?
Exactly. Being able to say, like, when X person shows up at your desk, hey, this is time we need to evacuate the building or we need to move to a safe place. Something we face here a lot in Tennessee are tornadoes. So we have to shelter in place a lot. So just being able to explain to that person very quickly and efficiently, but not taking away their agency of being able to do something themselves. So I think it's just starting a lot of those conversations, because I think that we have gotten some organizations have gotten away from doing it, especially with, through the pandemic and a lot of people working remotely. Have we practiced those things? Have we brought in new employees that may not be familiar? But that's working with probably your HR, if you have a DE&I department, of figuring out how do we start ensuring that, our employees know how to evacuate this building safely, and understanding that this is going to continue to evolve. This isn't just what one person may need, may not be the same as the next person. And so understanding that we're going to have to be able to evolve and ebb and flow as this move. And as people come in and out of the company to say, okay, we may need to change this because this worked for the last person that we have that was hard of hearing, but this person wants something slightly different, and how can we accommodate them?
You think sometimes, and I was just thinking this as you were talking, that fear sometimes stops people from approaching others and asking for help, because we do hear stories, we see it on social media. Alex is offended because Ray asked him a question about why he wears glasses or whatever.
Mhm.
So because I freaked out on you, you don't want to ask anything of others, even though you're reaching out because you want to learn something to help and be a part of what Alex needs. And if it's someone that's hearing impaired or visually impaired or in a wheelchair, fear sometimes kicks in because they're afraid if I ask, they're going to get mad at me because I'm asking, because they you start telling yourself different kind of stories.
Hmm.
So does fear sometimes, do you think, kick in, and why some organizations, I don't want to say forget to address, but maybe just kind of shy away a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some fear there because there's the fear of saying the wrong thing, is the fear of doing the wrong thing. And I think how, we kind of fix that is saying that like going to the person's like in a way of like, hey, I want to make sure that we are serving you the best way that we can in this
Mm.
organization. What are your needs? Instead of making an assumption of, okay, do you need this, this, or this? Be like, do you have any needs? Because the person may say, hey, I don't need anything at all, and that's fine. And some of that may be the only people that you may be able to talk to are the people that are willing to, disclose this to their HR and DE&I departments. And so that's why I say partnering with them because they will know, how to go about it in a way that, is going to give the person their most agency back, but that's really what this is about, is giving them their agency and bringing them to the table and letting them be a part of the conversation. One of the other things that I talked about in my presentation was just about the growth of neurodiverse people in the workplace. Every person is different, and so it's like their needs may be different, but how do we bring that into an exercise structure where people may be doing stuff differently, but all towards the same goal. And so it's really getting through of like not individualizing for everybody or everything, but understanding that people may need things in different formats and how do we get it to them? Because I think that's really an important piece of this is just really trying to meet people where they're at to make sure that they stay safe.
I think that's a perfect little quote there. Meet them where they're at, rather than me assuming or trying to push my viewpoint or perceptions on others. When it comes to exercising, anything could happen because somebody who is maybe hard of hearing, and I had worked with someone who was, and they were a key subject matter expert, and you had to take into account, and we needed to if we really wanted to be successful on our exercises.
Mhm.
And I think maybe sometimes people forget that.
Yeah, I think that's been a big thing is that like you may have a key person that you have to provide that information to them differently. It may be better and more efficient to provide it to them in writing versus trying to, verbally say it out loud because they may miss stuff. And so people may have different forms. So how do we start, just building that in? Uh, One of the things that I've learned this term is universal design. So really, how do we start making our exercises and doing our testing in this way of like universally being inclusive of people with differences, from the start, because then we don't have to go back and try to retrofit it. You're seeing that a lot in education for all the different people's types of learning styles. So a teacher may say something verbally, but they'll also have it up on the screen for the people that like to read the information. Doing that type of design inside of our exercises means that we'll be able to catch a wider breadth of people without really having to do anything different because we are already thinking about them from the beginning of our design phase of how we build our plans, how we exercise them, who's in the room, all of that.
You mentioned the having a screen there as well, because depending on a topic, sometimes I'm visual. I need a
Hmm.
visual to understand it, and other times I don't need the visual. I can
Hmm.
understand the audio, to,
Hmm.
the auditory aspect of it, and I don't need the picture. If you're going to be inclusive of others, you really have to be cognizant of using both and taking that a step further.
Exactly. And so that's really what it's starting to think about is like, how are we? ensuring that we're being inclusive of everybody because it's like not only having the visual, the audio, are, if it's something that can be recorded, are we recording? Because somebody may not be able to process as fast as someone else what they're hearing. And so maybe they want to go back and take those notes. And that's a place where I really feel like AI is really starting to come into play because a lot of times what you're seeing now, I think I saw in PowerPoint here recently, it'll do live closed captioning for you inside of your presentation. So for people that may be hard of hearing, we used to like think about when we go into these big conference rooms and different things like that, and somebody may be up at the front speaking. Now that person may be able to read what the person is saying in real time in a way that, 5 or 6 years ago, we really didn't have that kind of real time capacity. So thinking about all these different tools that we are coming out with and things like AI, having some of that automated, like it's none of the tools are 100%, but they're a lot better than not having it at all because then at least you have the closed captioning and then you have a transcript of what was said. And so somebody can go back and read and maybe take notes if they needed to for after actions, but just if they missed something because they just couldn't hear or understand what the person was saying up in the front. So really starting to use those tools, I think, is a way that we can start building that into the design of our plans.
And using that as well is key, going back to exercises,
Hmm.
because in a real situation, you've got multiple people and communications going on and multiple activities. So if you can leverage some of these tools to help people that have, whatever whatever it is,
Hmm.
then that's going to help them be a part of it and help part of that exercise or the actual restoration and recovery response efforts, because now they really are a part of everything.
Exactly. They're not having to spend, I always say it's like they're not having to spend the time and energy to try to just understand because they can see it. And so then they can move forward faster. One of the things that I brought up was, thinking about a lot of times we put our plans in English because it's easier for us. I work for a company where I've got people all around the world. So if it's easier for it to be in your native language because then you don't have to do that translation, then I just need you to point out to me all of these different places and point to me in your plan where you have them. But if it's in Spanish, if it's Arabic, if it's in some other language, that's fine. I just need to be able to attest that, yeah, you have it, but now you're not spending that processing power trying to translate it into English, figuring out what it's doing that, then having to respond back. I just need you to do the work. I don't need you to spend the time trying to decipher how to do the work.
And if you're a large company up in Canada, your plans have to be in English and French.
Okay.
Especially the big like banks and things like that, and
Yeah.
government agencies. Yeah, it's all bilingual. It has to be French and English.
Yeah.
Because there are people that speak French all across the country.
Hmm.
Same with English. So
Yeah. And so thinking through that. Mhm.
yeah, would you believe we have less than 1 minute left? So, do you have a final thought or final comment you'd like to say about this?
Yeah, I would just say that, I think equity inclusion in our testing and planning, really thinking about how can we best serve our people? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure our people get to go home safely, and we're here to make sure that our processes are stored. So this only helps that, and it helps us be able to do that quicker and faster. And I think we're all looking for ways to do that, and this is just another way that we could start using.
Yeah, yeah, and it really does in the end could save lives. What
Exactly.
what more of a reason do you need than that, right?
So true.
On that note, Ray, we've come to the end of the show. I can't believe that 24 minutes went by so fast. We've
Yeah.
come to the end of this segment, I should say, because we have another topic we're going to touch on. So
Yes.
stay tuned. Ray, thank you so much for this topic. And for those watching and listening, we'll be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.